Hi, welcome to Justin's Morning Coffee. Okay, so what I want to do today is keep going on the 7 basic plots. Last video I talked about tragedy, and I want to just tease out a little bit more of that. So you might say that this is going to be tragedy part 2. So this is kind of how I'm thinking about tragedy. We talked about rags to riches as the story, the first story in life, going from pure potential to competence in the world, overcoming the monster as dealing with bullies in the world, voyage and return about renewing yourself and renewing your purpose and renewing your sensibilities in the world. And then comedy, which I haven't done the official lecture yet, but comedy is about finding your place in the world, your identity in the world, and your other half in the world. That's everything going up the mountain of success. Now, it's my contention that not everybody makes it from the mountain of success to the mountain of legacy. The first half of life, the first mountain, to the second mountain. And that the tragedy, something to do with the tragic plot, and navigating that landscape from the world of taking in, breathing in, and having success and having competence and accomplishing things in life to giving back and giving on to the next generation. So I want to explore that a little bit more. Now, last time we talked about 2 kinds of tragedy. There's the Oedipus-style tragedy, which is the Greek style, and then there's the Faustian-style tragedy, which is more the blend of Christian and Greek styles, you might say. So in order to explain how it is, I think that tragedy is bound up with this really failure to make it across to this second mountain, and how the rebirth plot is an answer to that, I need to explain a little bit about these 2 kinds of tragedy. So, as review, let's go over that real quick. The Oedipus-style tragedy starts with a dark prophecy that is proclaimed during the anticipation stage. The dream stage is that the hero tries to escape the reach of that fate. The frustration stage is that the forces of antagonism close in on that protagonist. The nightmare stage is the awareness or realization that they have been trapped all along. This is Oedipus realizing that he has inadvertently killed his father and married his mother, and that someone or something has been sort of like guiding him for that to happen against his will or against his awareness. And then the conclusion is some kind of tragic resistance or despair. So that's what we talked about last time. So you have Noah Cross here, John Huston's character in Chinatown, is sort of like in this tragic style, the evil genius, the god or sense of fate that controls or locks some protagonist inside of this circle. So they're locked in this world and there's no way out. And then there's somebody outside of it that's really orchestrating it all, and the power differential is huge. So this is the state of affairs in the Oedipus style tragedy. So you've got some kind of evil genius, and then you've got some kind of Oedipal figure here locked inside. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about the 1970s and the revival of this style of tragedy. For example, in something like Bonnie and Clyde. In Bonnie and Clyde, the very first shot of the movie, Faye Dunaway is locked. This is just actually her bedpost, but symbolically, she's locked inside of this world. And then she's given the chance now to try to get out of it.
Hey, boy, what you doing with my mama's car? Wait there. Ain't you ashamed? You're trying to steal an old lady's automobile.
Oh, come on now, what you talking about? I've been thinking about buying me one.
What line of work you in? When you're not stealing cars.
I was in state prison.
State prison?
It was armed robbery.
The things that turn up in the street these days.
You can think of the tragic figure as starting off inside this world, trapped, and then some kind of offer to get out. An offer by the devil, and this is the transition to the Faustian style. So there's something to do, I think, with pride that is embedded within this style of tragedy, You can see the same thing in Amadeus. You've got Salieri here, who is resentful of Mozart. So Mozart, weirdly enough, is the one who's got him locked in a box. If it wasn't for the existence of Mozart, he'd be perfectly happy with his music. But because his music is inferior to Mozart's music, he's tortured. So there's something to do with that. There's something to do with this feeling of being trapped and an inability to have gratitude or gratefulness or being able to appreciate the limited life that you live within that circle. It's the awareness of your limitations, maybe, something like that. Okay, so that brings us to the Faustian style tragedy. This is the style of tragedy that Christopher Booker has in the 7 Basic Plots, which is a slightly different 5-act structure. So I want to just put these two styles up together. They blend together a little bit, like the Faye Dunaway one. That's halfway. I would put Bonnie and Clyde is halfway in between Oedipus and Faustian. She starts off trapped in this world, but then she does do a bargain with the devil in order to try to get out of that world. So in the Faustian tragedy, it's a little bit different. In the Faustian tragedy, the anticipation stage is a misguided dream is hatched. So it doesn't start out with a fateful prophecy. It starts with an idea that the protagonist has. A misguided dream is hatched. During the dream stage, at first it seems like this dream is going to work out. So let's say Walter White decides that he's going to sell meth. And then the dream stage would be, well, it's going okay. Like he hasn't been caught. He's making some money, right? That would be the dream stage is not quite lining up with reality yet. You're getting away with it. Reality has not closed in on you yet. And then the frustration stage is when the reality of the foolhardy nature of the dream sets in. So that's when, the frustrations start to mount and it's not as easy as you thought. It's not going to work out the way you thought.
Walt, what did that phone call mean?
Where's the rest? The money, Skylar. Where is the rest?
I gave it to Ted.
You did what?
Walt!
You gave our money to Bennick.
Please!
You've committed this trespass. You've left the path of the straight and narrow, and now you're going afoul of some force in the world. The nightmare stage then is the full force of darkness inherent within the idea is manifest. So the nightmare stage is when Walter White, not only is he himself living a nightmare, his family falls apart, everything that he had worked for, ironically, it turns out that he loses as a result of trying to go down this path, but also he himself turns into a nightmare. He is a nightmarish person.
You're not some hardened criminal, Walt. You are in over your head. No. That's what we tell them. That's the truth.
No, it's not the truth.
Of course it is. Desperate for money?
Okay, we're done here.
Roped into working for... Walt, please. And admit you're in danger.
Who are you talking to right now? Who is it you think you see? I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
He turns into an evil person, and that is very nightmarish. And then the conclusion of this style tragedy is that the tragic hero reaps the consequences of their actions, and it winds up in death. Okay, so the Faustian style tragedy. The hero or heroine commits some great offense and is drawn down step by step into paying the price. Okay, and the hero or heroine may be made up of both light and dark qualities, but their dark side prevails. They tend to become darker and darker, while light in the story constellates more and more outside of them. So that's this kind of like deciding to go down this path, and it just gets darker and darker and darker, and they get more and more and more evil as the story goes on. And you can see that if you watch the show Breaking Bad. And then, so this light constellates first in their innocent victims and finally triumphantly in those who gather in opposition to overthrow them. So this version of tragedy, the Faustian style tragedy, is really an overcoming the monster story from the point of view of the monster. You can think of it that way. So remember, this style of tragedy starts with a misguided dream. At first, it seems like it's going to work out. Then things start to get frustrating. Then it turns into a full-blown nightmare, and finally they die. That's the basic, simple 5 acts of the modern day tragedy. So now, why? This is an interesting thing to me. Why is it that we will continually go back to these same story styles, same story patterns? I think it's because it's actually true in real life. When you when you go off the path, when you hatch a plan that has inherent within it the seeds of this evil, of this downfall, this is the pattern that your life will follow. So let's just take a look at Hitler. Hitler actually is a perfect example of the tragic archetype. So let's just look at his life. If you watch, there's a documentary called Hitler: A Career, which I think was made maybe in the 70s. Possibly the 80s, a German documentary which you can watch with English voiceover. But let's take a look at this. Okay, so anticipation stage. A misguided dream is hatched. So we might think of it in terms of Charlie Chaplin here. And and so this, of course, is from The Great Dictator, Charlie Chaplin movie, and this is a perfect interpretation, a perfect rendition of this idea of a dream. And so it's a dream for world domination. It's a utopian dream. It's this idea that you can have what it is that you want. And you're not really thinking perhaps about the means to get there. In fact, it's an ends justifies the means activity. Okay, so that's the anticipation stage. So there's this idea that this dream is hatched for world domination. And then what's the first thing that happens in the story of World War II is that at first it does seem like the dream will work out.
For them, it was like a homecoming. For Hitler, it was another stage in his conquest of land. They called it the War of Flowers.
So Hitler is super popular among the Germans. He invades Czechoslovakia. Nobody pushes back. He finally takes over France. He winds up in front of the Eiffel Tower, dancing in front of all of his generals and adored by the masses. So the dream stage is, there's been no pushback yet, you might say. There's been no pushback yet for the foolhardiness of this dream. But there's something within the dream, something within that idea that you hatched that cannot let that dream to continue. And so that's when reality starts to bite back. So then you get into the frustration stage.
He wanted Britain out of the way so that he could finally turn his attention eastward. This had always been his ultimate goal. But the British remained unapproachable. All his attacks only provoked fiercer resistance. Even the howling dive bombers failed to wear down the British people. In Poland and France, they had produced devastating results, but not in England. Although Hitler soon resorted to wiping out whole cities, Churchill remained adamant. However long and hard the road may be, we shall never surrender. In Churchill, Hitler had met his first real challenge.
Britain won't surrender, the rise of Winston Churchill, and then, of course, you get into Operation Barbarossa.
They still put on a show of confidence. In fact, they'd become so used to repeated success that they scarcely understood what was happening. With the war in the West unresolved, Hitler decided to turn east.
They go into Russia, and then there's the cold of the winter, and then the Russians don't want to surrender. right? So then it's like frustration, frustration. And then the idea is, and this is where the tragic hero has this blind spot, this flaw that says, I'm going to double down. You know, I've encountered these frustrations. It's not like the dream stage anymore. But at this point in the story, that is when the protagonist makes the fateful choice that cannot lead to anywhere besides death. That's when they double down. This is when Walter White has the chance to get out of being a meth cook, but he decides to go in even harder, even more fully into cooking meth. And this is the sense of what happened with Hitler is, you know, he attacks Russia, and there's this sense of, now that he's done that, it may take a long time, but there's no way out now for him. He's made a choice that it's either win or die. And what happens is that eventually you die in that plot type. So then, of course, the conclusion ends in death, suicide, some form of self-destruction or destruction at the hands of others. Okay. So we've got this. So you think, okay, well, those are kind of two different styles of story. You know, in this one, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Jack Nicholson's character in Chinatown, Thelma and Louise in Thelma and Louise. And then the Faustian one, which is the story of Hitler, the picture of Dorian Gray, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Walter White in Breaking Bad, where there's a clear choice. So one, it seems like it doesn't have a choice, and the other one seems like it is the result of a choice, right? Is that just the difference between the Greek and the Hebrew sensibilities, perhaps? Maybe. Or maybe they're related. So this is what I kind of want to explore. So you can think of it this way. I like to think of it as two parts of one larger story. And so you can either go forwards or you can go backwards. But in general, you've got two worlds here. And one person escapes the world and becomes the owner of a new world. So Walter White feels trapped inside this circle. Talked about that last time. The deal with the devil comes in the form of his opportunity to cook meth and become a drug dealer. He becomes a drug dealer and turns into Heisenberg. Okay, and then once he's Heisenberg, that's sort of like what Noah Cross is, John Huston's character in Chinatown, where he winds up with his own little world that he now controls, and inside of that is basically what he used to be. You know, there's an Oedipus figure now inside of this world that he controls, that wants to get out just the same way as he wanted to get out of his. So that you can think of this as kind of like a cycle. You know, it's just moving around of one person breaking out via a deal with the devil and then creating another system of control out of which this person now needs to break out as well. And so there's this cycle of victimization, victimhood leading to victimization, etc. Okay. So you can think of it going backwards. So you think, okay, the Oedipus figure, we meet them once they're already locked in here, and we don't really know that much about Noah Cross in Chinatown, except for that he is in control of all this stuff. But you can think of the Faustian style as a backstory, the backstory of the Oedipus Rex style tragedy, where at some point in his past, he had a deal with the devil that gave him control of this little kingdom. Something along those lines. And prior to that, he himself was locked in someone else's kingdom of oppression and control. So you can think of it backwards like that, or you can think of it forwards. You know, Walter White starts out, and he's mild-mannered Walter White, but he feels oppressed. He's given an offer by the devil to become Heisenberg. He becomes Heisenberg. Heisenberg turns into a Noah Cross figure, and then there's another system of control, and inside of that system of control is another Oedipus, and on we go.
Doesn't it seem like something's missing?
What about the soul?
The soul. There's nothing but chemistry here.
So that's how I'm kind of thinking about this. Now let's talk about this idea that the tragic hero, the tragic figure, particularly the Faustian tragic hero, dies in the Quest Valley. They never make it to the Mountain of Legacy. So you can think of it this way. The Mountain of Success requires a certain number of stories to get to the top of, So you start with a rags to riches story. You can see that in the backstory of Breaking Bad, whenever they have flashbacks to when Walter White was in college, when Walter White was a brilliant young mind, and he had all of this potential, and he was going to start this company called Gray Matter with his partner, right? So he had a rags to riches style story, a certain amount of success. But at some point, he gets off that path via this deal with the devil, and the climb up to the top of this mountain of success is done for all the wrong reasons, or you might say for in the wrong way. Some kind of climb up here. So there's a very pivotal scene where he hasn't been caught. He's got all the money he needs, and he can completely get out. But what does he say?
I know for a fact all you needed was 737,000 because you worked it all out, like, mathematically. $5 million isn't nothing. And we could have it tomorrow. We would be out.
Jesse, you asked me if I was in the meth business or the money business. Neither. I'm in the empire business.
Is a meth empire really something to be that proud of?
I'm in the empire business. It's not about the money, it's about the empire. So he really gets stuck on this mountain of success in the sense that he's gathering in all that money, all that success, all that notoriety, and he's keeping it. And the natural, you could say the created order way of being quintessentially human and flourishing within your life and within the larger community is that you need to give it all back. That's a natural way of doing things, you might say. And so when you don't make it to the mountain of rebirth, you die in this midlife crisis area. You die in the Quest Valley. I think that's kind of what it is. Now, I happen to think also that the Quest story and the Rebirth story, those are two ways to avoid this fate, the tragic fate, you might say. So what we're going to look at next is how the Rebirth plot is getting off of this train towards tragedy and death. All right, so in order to understand this, I want to look at an old film noir film by Billy Wilder, Double Indemnity, Fred McMurray. Classic film noir tragic film. However, one thing that you'll notice is that sometimes the filmmaker wants to give us a little bit of hope at the end of a tragic story. The hero still dies. The hero still sort of gets what's coming to them. But we're given a little bit of a change of heart at the end. So it's not like the hero is going completely to their grave with a hardened heart. Not defying the structures of reality, the structures of the world that they live in, and going off in a tragic blaze of glory like the Camusian hero, the existential tragic hero, but having some kind of a repentance moment. And that is what's moving us, I think. That's what moves the story from the tragic space into the rebirth space. Now, in this case, the protagonist still dies at the end of this, but maybe there is some sense of redemption. So let's just explore that a little bit as we move towards the rebirth plot and see how this might shift around a little bit for us. So here's the opening scene of Double Indemnity.
Suppose you'll call this a confession when you hear it. I just want to set you right about something you couldn't see because it was smack up against your nose. You were pretty good in there for a while, Keys. You said it wasn't suicide. Check. You said it was murder. Check. You thought you had it cold, didn't you? It was perfect. Except it wasn't, because you made one mistake. When it came to picking the killer, you picked the wrong guy. You want to know who killed Dietrichson? I killed Dietrichson. Me, Walter Neff. Yes, I killed him. I killed him for money. And for a woman. And I didn't get the money, and I didn't get the woman. Pretty, isn't it?
So he didn't get the money and he didn't get the woman. Isn't that brilliant? So this is obviously the end of the story and told in a flashback, not unlike the original version of Oedipus Rex. It's done in flashback. And so there's always, I think, bound up with tragedy, this notion of hubris. Oedipus Rex is king of the world, of his known world, and then this backstory serves as a way to sort of break his pride. And when Oedipus, at the end of the story, gouges out his eyes, anytime you see a character gouging out their eyes or going blind in a story, there's a sense that maybe another eye has opened up. Another set of eyes has opened up. And so now he understands his place in the world. In the Greek-style tragedy, he learns his place in the world. He's not divine. There's some higher system of control or power. It might not be good in this case. It might be sort of toying with him, but he learned his place. He learned his sort of position within the cosmos. As you move into the medieval period and you move into the more Christian and Judeo-Christian influenced style stories like this one, you're going to see maybe a softening of the heart, a confessional posture. It's still a tragedy. Like I said, it's still a tragedy because he does get what's coming to him at the end. But is there some kind of a redemption of the soul in the form of this confession is the question. And is that the thing that sort of moves us to the rebirth plot? So now let's watch the typical bargain with the devil scene. This is a quintessential film noir motif. Usually the temptation to break out of or get off the path, you might say, of going up the mountain, the proper way up the mountain, to get off the path and try to have some kind of a shortcut. Is done with this temptation, which is done by a woman. And so let's watch the bargain with the devil scene from Double Indemnity.
You handle just automobile insurance or all kinds?
All kinds.
Accident insurance?
Accident insurance? Sure, Mr. Dietrichson. Wish you'd tell me what's engraved on that anklet.
Just my name.
I think I like that.
Mr. Neff, why don't you drop by tomorrow evening around 8:30? He'll be in then.
Who?
My husband.
That tears it. 8:30 tomorrow evening, then. Will you be here, too?
I guess so. I usually am.
It was a hot afternoon, and I can still remember the smell of honeysuckle all along that street. How could I have known that murder can sometimes smell like honeysuckle? Maybe you would have known, Keys, the minute you mentioned accident insurance. But I didn't. I felt like a million.
Who knew, Keys, that murder would smell like honeysuckle? So again here now we have this blend, kind of like in Bonnie and Clyde. This pathway that he went on, which was clearly going to lead to his death, the insurance fraud, killing her husband in order to get the money, and then the whole tragic outcome, which is that he never gets the girl, he never gets the money. Is it like Oedipus Rex, in the sense that the fates have got him caught in a web and there's no escape for him? There's no other way that this could have gone. In Seven, like we looked at last week, John Doe completely controls everything, and there's nothing the Brad Pitt character can do other than be a pawn in this big game that this all-powerful evil character is orchestrating. Well, in this case, you have to put the blame, I think, on Walter Neff. He could have walked away. He didn't have to let her lure him into this insurance fraud. So there's a sense that there's a character growth here, and the blind spot is now closed. Like there's a sense that he knows the truth. Now, of course, he doesn't get out of the consequences of this, but it's that character change, I think, that starts to move us towards the rebirth idea. The idea that in order to get off of that downward path, even if you're doing it very, very late, as in this case, you have to understand the true place that you have in the world and the true consequences of the actions that you took in the world, the result of the choices that you took. Okay, so now let's look at the end, and I'm going to show a clip from Billy Wilder here in a minute on how he was thinking about ending this film and what is the most satisfying way to do it. So let's take a look at the very, very end of the movie. This is now the book into that confessional scene that we watched earlier.
I'm going to call for a doctor. What for? So they can patch me up? So I can walk into that gas chamber up at San Quentin on my own power? Something like that. I got a different idea. Suppose you went back to bed and didn't find these cylinders till tomorrow morning when the office opens. Give me one good reason. I need 4 hours to get where I'm going. I'm going across the border. You haven't got a chance, Walter. That's what you think. You'll never even make the elevator. Hello. Send an ambulance to the Pacific Building on Olive Street. Yeah? It's a police job. How you doing, Walter? Somebody moved the elevator a couple of miles away. You know why you couldn't figure this one, Keys? Because the guy you were looking for was too close. He was right across the desk from you. Closer than that, Walter. I love you, too.
Okay, very interesting. So compare that ending, that confessional ending, to the very depressing ending of Chinatown. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. There's nothing you can do to change the state of affairs. That's the difference, I think, between that Greek style and moving into that Judeo-Christian style, which is this idea that while the rules that govern the world, the grooves of creation, the way the cosmos operates, you have to fit into. In other words, don't don't have an affair with a married woman and murder her husband so that you can get the insurance money. The idea of transgressing against those rules, in this case, we can clearly see their folly, because the rules are they're actually correct. They're actually just. Whereas in Oedipus Rex and in Chinatown, maybe to some degree in some of these 1970s films like Bonnie and Clyde or like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, it's not clear that the way things are is the way that they really should be. And so there's this tension between, this sort of oscillation between, we don't like the way things are, and there's nothing you can do, and it's not your fault. The tragic ending is not your fault. It's the fault of whoever made all these rules, whether that be society, whether that be Noah Cross, whether that be John Doe in Seven, or was it something that you did? Was it some choice that you made? And while the antagonist character while Mrs. Dietrichson represents that sort of Noah Cross character, represents that John Doe character from Seven, that she is kind of spinning a web and sort of trying to catch him. If it wasn't for him coming along, she would have used someone else to manipulate into killing her husband. So there is a sense that this is a fly caught in the web of a spider, and that's very typical of the film noir genre. But the confession at the end implies that Walter Neff could have avoided that fate. It wasn't like it was inevitable, this deterministic, heavy determinism that you see in the Oedipus Rex style tragedy. So let's watch a clip of Billy Wilder talking about how he sort of thought about the ending. Just like I showed you last time with Thelma and Louise, there was an alternate ending shot for this movie, and this is his explanation for why he chose this particular ending.
Have you ever shot more than one ending for a film?
Yes, I have shot an ending which I chopped off, like in Double Indemnity. I had an ending where Mr. McMurray was executed in the gas chamber, and there was a kind of a thing between him and Eddie Robinson, who was watching it. Then, as I was proceeding with the picture, I found a scene where he tries to, after Robinson realizes that McMurray is the murderer and bleeding and wants to go to the elevator and kind of get into his car and go to Mexico or something. And he collapses there, you know, and can't even light the match anymore the way he always did. And in the distance you heard already the siren of the police car, the ambulance, so you knew what the outcome is going to be. And I ended it there because it was very anticlimactic. You know, he didn't need now. We knew that he was guilty. He confessed. We knew that how the two men felt about each other. Unimportant. Usually I have just one ending, not necessarily the best, but that's all I shoot. But sometimes I shoot very little celluloid. I don't have too many possibilities of fiddling around with it. I should have more celluloid, but it's so hard to get, and I want to get out of there. I want to get away from them.
I'm always fascinated to hear explanations that filmmakers and artists and storytellers, novelists make when they're trying to feel along and find the appropriate pieces as they fit together in these stories. And that's why I think they click into these archetypes. Because interesting there. So he shot a different ending, felt like it didn't work, went with this ending. And there's this intuitional process, you know, kind of feeling it out. Well, that's not quite right. That doesn't fit. I continually go back to Nicholas Wolterstorff's idea of fittingness. There's certain things that just fit together, and this idea of the grooves of creation, that there's a certain way that things sort of flow. And in the psychological realm and the archetypal realm, they just sort of fit together in certain ways. And so there's a sense that he wanted to, I think, hint towards rebirth. And again, like I said, I don't think that story, I think it's a tragic story. I think it is a tragedy. But he wanted to move towards the idea that maybe this rebirth idea can happen through confession, through the awareness of your sin, so to speak, through this notion of the blind spot being closed and this sort of sense of you being formed to the world. It's not Thelma and Louise. It's not Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, Chinatown, right? That's where the world needs to be conformed to you. You know, there's a sense that Jake is the one right side up character in an upside down world of Chinatown. And that's the juxtaposition there. And he can't do anything. He's caught in that web. In this case, Walter Neff is caught in a web. Mrs. Dietrichson, the character, she is the same character that you get in these tragedies. John Doe in Seven, Noah Cross in Chinatown, etc. Right? There's a sense that if he hadn't walked into her web, she would have found someone else to help her kill her husband and get the insurance money. He just happened to have the unfortunate circumstances of walking into that place at that time and fell under her spell. However, you can see that Billy Wilder is attaching it to a choice, the idea that if he didn't follow that, like he could have walked away. He could have just walked away and he could have not continued that, not allowed that seduction to happen. And that now is the world. That's the difference, I think, between that Greek closed world of Oedipus Rex, where the gods are controlling everything, and it's really not up to you what your destiny is. And that's the hubris. The hubris in that Greek world is it's not up to you what's going to happen to you. So you think you're a king. Well, look, you're not in control of anything. That's kind of seems like the moral of Oedipus Rex. Whereas in this one, it says, you know, there is a sense that you can become aware of how the world works and you can choose a different path. So that's when we're getting to the rebirth style. So I think maybe Billy Wilder's moving in that direction. Now, I want to take a look now at the end of Breaking Bad. We've been talking about Breaking Bad this whole time. How is it that Vince Gilligan now wraps up the long 6-season history of this tragic figure of Walter White? And does he have any remorse? Does he have any sense of confession like we saw with Walter Neff? So let's watch that scene and see what happens.
Guess I got what I deserve. All that time without a word. Or I'd regret.
And so there we hear the words of the song. I guess I got what I deserve. But I think the thrust of this scene is that appreciation, that unwillingness to let go of the accoutrements, of the attachments of that first mountain. And so that's the last moment that we see Walter White is appreciating and sort of still loving those accomplishments. As opposed to Walter Neff. Walter Neff seems to feel like that moment that he left the path, the moment that he got off the true way, you might think, he regrets. I mean, that's an interesting thing about deathbed confessions. The idea of the deathbed confession is this idea. Well, maybe you can just sort of sin as much as you want during your life, and then just have a confession at the end, and you can redeem your soul, right? But I can't remember who it was, but somebody said something very profound, and they said, well, but the thing about that is you have to really regret it, and the idea of really regretting the choices that you made in your life, really regretting them, and the full awareness of how much destruction that caused, and the full awareness that you had the power within your free will to do otherwise. That's got to be incredible torture. And so to sort of think, well, maybe I'll confess on my deathbed, golly, that's pretty intense. That's pretty intense. Okay, so I want to wrap it up for today. I think that now what I want to do next is start to widen out that gap between the tragic hero and the rebirth hero, because I think that as I give you some more examples, that we'll be able to see this a little bit better. So next time, I want to talk about Martin Scorsese's The Irishman and The Revenant, two rebirth stories where I think it's a lot clearer right where that getting off that downward tragic path happens for these protagonists. And that's really the essence of the rebirth plot. And I'm excited about it because I think it's one of the most important life lessons that you can learn. How to stop the tragic cycle. How to get from the mountain of success to the mountain of legacy. How to find redemption when you've gone off the path. That's what these rebirth stories, I think, are teaching us. And so that'll be next. So we'll get fully into the rebirth plot next. So thanks for watching. Again, I'm having a lot of fun with this. Please leave a comment and let me know how this is landing for you, what you think, whether or not it's making any sense to you at all. Sometimes I think it's a little funny sitting here talking to myself here. And of course, I've said this before, but if it wasn't for something like this, I'd be just talking to myself in my car. Anyway, so I'm glad that YouTube exists as an outlet for this. And the more I develop this, the more I really want to turn it into a book and turn it into an actual formal class someday. So that's what I'm working for. And you YouTube people are sort of my initial guinea pigs in bouncing this idea off of you and working it out for myself. The more I articulate it, the more I talk about it, the more I try to put it in video form, the clearer it gets, and the more I can sort of sand off those rough edges. So again, thanks for being part of my grand experiment here, and I will talk to you next time.